Picking a quarter off the ground once saved my life. What is your most lucky experience? When I was younger, I loved climbing in this huge pine tree that grew next to my garage. With pine trees though, the branches dry and get really brittle. So I fell out of it a number of times, accidentally putting my weight on a branch that just couldn't hold me. After the fourth time I fell out of the tree and broke a finger. I was forbidden to climb that tree ever again. Being a 10-year-old boy, I couldn't obey this tyrannical rule. I waited for my parents to go to work. Then I climbed it one last time. Of course, a branch snaps. On the way down, I hit a thick branch and flip end over end before slamming into the ground. Groaning in the bushes, I roll over to my side to see a piece of steel rebar sticking up next to me, right under my armpit, about 3 inches from piercing my torso. I was almost impaled on a piece of an old fence. This terrified me to no end for years. I'd have nightmares of falling towards a rusty rebar spear in slow motion. I think that if I hadn't hit that other branch on the way down, or even went off that branch in the other direction, I would have speared myself and lay there dying for hours. When I was in high school I was supposed to go out to my family's lake house for the weekend and my mom ended up getting food poisoning and we couldn't go. My boyfriend was having a party that night and I decided to just drive over there and ended up walking in on him cheating on me. The lucky part is I was so in love with this guy I probably would have married him right after graduation and been the wife of a drug addicted arsehole that has spent more time in jail than out since then. TLDR, my mom's explosive diarrhea saved me from marrying a meth head with no teeth. Once, when I was at the beach, happily swimming like any regular kid, a $20 bill hit me in the face. Now for some reason, I had my mouth open. So a soaking wet $20 bill basically just tried to murder me. I open my mouth, get it out and freak out to go show my parents. Now remember, I was something like 7 years old at the time. So $20 was like winning the lottery. My parents tell me they'll hold on to it. And I go back to play in the water when the unbelievable happens. Another $20 bill floated by me. This one deciding not to jump down my throat. To this day, I'm convinced there was a bank heist somewhere in the area. And little cheesy flight happened to cash in. TL. DR 7-year-old me survives murder attempt by a $20 bill. Goes on to find another. I think this happened in 9th grade. I was just laying on my bed using my laptop. I had been like that for hours. And I suddenly decide I'm hungry and go grab a snack from the kitchen. When I'm in the kitchen I hear a loud crash. And I run back into my room. My ceiling fan had fallen right where my head had been a minute ago. My cat had also been on the bed but thankfully she was far enough away that it didn't hit her. Although it certainly freaked her out. So I'm alive. But I now have a healthy fear of ceiling fans. Not me, but my super awesome granddad. He always used to say that being a red-blooded American teenager saved his life in World War II. He was a ball turret gunner stationed in Italy. Ball turret gunners had some of the lowest life expectancies in the Army Air Corps seeing as they were constantly exposed to enemy gunfire. Since the job was so dangerous, gunners got certain perks. One of those perks was a nice bicycle. Granddad was riding around Italy when he saw this amazingly gorgeous Italian woman. Hottest woman he'd ever seen. He did what any 18-year-old boy would do. He stared at her. Then he fell. He broke his collarbone and was hospitalized. He was scheduled for a flight later that day but obviously couldn't go up. That flight was shot down and all the crew were killed. And so, I thank my lucky stars every day that granddad had a thing for hot Italian chicks. Otherwise, I wouldn't exist. TL. DR Boner saved my granddad's life. I have told this story on Reddit a while ago I am sure. I used to live in Christchurch, New Zealand. One day my girlfriend and I were having lunch in the city. We get some fried rice. $2 rice is awesome. We forget to buy a drink. So after we finish our meal we line up to get a Coke. But because it was lunchtime it was really filling up. So we decide to leave the shop and get a drink elsewhere. We leave the store. Walk outside when a massive earthquake hits. The shop front where we were falls in on itself. 30 seconds earlier we would have been in trouble. It happened the exact thing to me. I went to get my driver's license with 2 other friends and I was told I needed another copy of my ID. When we came back after getting it, I accidentally dropped a worthless 10 Mexican cents coin. And then a friend stopped to pick it up. And we all stopped. That exact moment, we heard fucking tires screeching and a car crashed right in front of us. You don't realize how close it was until some minutes later. We couldn't do anything but laugh and keep that coin. My friend still has it. When I was 9, our air conditioning system broke, so a friend of my mom, who is also a police detective, came to look at it. As he was walking to the front yard to leave, I called out to him, "Helmer, wait." He stopped and turned around to see what I wanted, and just as he did I forgot what I was going to say. Just then tires screech and a Trans Am comes careening around the corner and slams into his unmarked cruiser, seriously doing 40 miles per hour at impact. He draws his weapon and yells, "Freeze, motherfucker." He would have almost certainly been between the cars if I had not said something. I was working on a high-rise construction project in Florida as a carpenter for a concrete company. The outside of the building shell had a 3-stroke 8-wire rope connected horizontally to stanchions that you hook your harness to as a fall protection measure. I had just come back from lunch and went back to work on the 12th floor. I attached to the safety wire and walked out onto a balcony to strip some forms when I remembered that I left my crowbar in the building. I climbed around and unhooked just as about 3,000 pounds of metal sheet decking fell off of the tower crane's hook. The sheet metal landed on the balcony and the safety wire, which if I had still been attached would have taken me down 12 floors. Luckily no one on the ground or on that side of the building was injured. It was determined that the strap that held the metal sheeting was faulty, and I took that as it was just old and should have been thrown out. I have stress-induced hallucinations which I take medications for. And one night I didn't want to take them, because they made me feel weird. So as I fell asleep, my hallucinations had me follow them outside half awake. I woke up the next morning on the town's golf course. When I got home I found that a jet engine had fallen through my roof and would have crushed me in my bed. They couldn't find the plane that it fell off of, and the serial code was burnt off. But the FAA put us in a hotel until our house was fixed. We're not really supposed to talk about it. Not sure if it exactly fits your question, but here's mine from a similar question. I used to attend a week-long D&D summer camp every year. And at this camp I was known for always wearing a Legend of Zelda baseball cap. Because of this, whoever was the dungeon master for my group at the time would put Zelda references into their campaign. On my last day of camp, as I was going to be too old to attend the next year, they teleported young Link from Majora's Mask into the game after some supernatural shit went down. Just to sort of honor my last day, I was a rogue shadow dancer. So, true to my character, I said I wanted to ask Link to give me the Ocarina of Time and the Zora transformation mask. Of course that was ridiculous because you would be totally overpowered. So they made an impossible check. They said I needed to roll a natural 20 on a 20-sided die, a 12 on a d12, a 10 on a d10, an 8 on a d8, a 6 on a d6, and 4 on a d4. And that is how Nyx the half Zora time-bending shadow dancer was born. Not my life, but my house from catching fire. My friend's mom had just dropped me and 2 friends off at my house. She took off before we realized no one was there and the door was locked. I didn't have a key on me and assumed my mom would be home anytime, so I suggested going to a park nearby to hang out for a while. After about 10-15 minutes one friend said he really needed to take a shit. I kept putting him off because there wasn't much I could do about getting in. Another 10 minutes go by and he begged me to break in through the bathroom window. One of those high, small skinny ones that plummet right into the shower. I hated doing it, but agreed to anyhow. After that struggle, I unlocked the door. He runs to the bathroom. That's when I walked into the kitchen. My mom accidentally left a pot of water boiling. The water was all boiled out and had turned the pot black. Literally seconds from catching fire in my opinion. Mom didn't show up for another hour or so. TL. DL locked out of house. Friend needed to take a shit. Broke in to catch a pot left on stove second away from catching fire. Shit saved my mom's house. Literally. This one time, I sassed a professor in chemistry class. We were discussing toxins, and he wanted me to demonstrate a particular solution for neutralizing a given poison's effects on the human body. My brilliant friend sitting next to me was grinning like the Cheshire Cat the entire time I worked on the problem, because she knew I couldn't solve it, and this would reaffirm that she was the smartest in the class. I ended up giving the professor one of the pre-prepared antidotes already in the room to be cheeky. He thought it was pretty damn funny, and my friend was not impressed. Later that year, I was in professor's lab at the end of a long day with another classmate. The professor offered us drinks, and after a few moments, my friend started to twitch and choke, and began turning blue. I shoved the bazaar down his throat that I had given to the professor earlier that year. You're welcome, Ron. Late to the party, and not me but my father, but I hear this story all the time. When my dad was younger, he lived in Tennessee. One winter he was driving along a back road in the mountains, and the road was frozen due to it raining. This was way back when cars probably didn't have the best of brakes or airbags. If anyone else has driven back roads on a mountain in Tennessee, there are some crazy turns, and back then guardrails apparently weren't everywhere. His car ends up slipping off of the road and sliding, rolling, down the mountain, finally coming to a stop when it hit a tree. Somehow without major injuries. This is only half of the luck. He manages to crawl out of the car 10 or so minutes later. He is greeted by a flashlight. Turns out there was a house just along the road he was driving on, and a man points the flashlight at him, and then at his car against the tree, and then down the rest of the mountain to a river that my dad's car would have slid into had the tree not stopped the car. The man says, "You know, I have been meaning to cut down that tree," as he shines the light from my dad to reveal several trees nearby that had just been cut down. My dad looks at him in disbelief and says, "Sir, you had best leave that damn tree alone." And then I assume the man helped my dad get in touch with someone to pick him up, and eventually they moved the car. I don't know the rest of the story after my dad's lines, to be honest. Two things. First, once, at my friend's house, we saw this beautiful tree asking us to climb it. Upon getting around 15-20 feet up, we noticed we couldn't get up. No one was home, so we waited in the tree, which we could see his house from. About 5 or so minutes later, a car came to their house. A man walked right into their house, then walked out. We told his parents when they got home. Turns out he was a registered child molester. Second, one time, when I was about 6, my family and I was on our way to Hershey Park, amusement park, somewhere in PA. I had to go piss. We pulled off the highway and headed to a gas station. A few feet from the exit, our tirade broke, sending our car into a ditch. If I wouldn't have had to take a piss, our tirade would have broke with us going 65 on a highway. I was riding my bike from campus to my house one day during the summer a few years ago. I had one of those shitty Walmart fixies, so as I was getting to cruising speed the chain popped off the gear and I coasted to the sidewalk to fix it. I looked up, and right about where I would have been down the street, a semi heading down the main road collided with a car stopped at the intersection and smashed him into a car that was parked on the side of the road. If the chain wouldn't have broken, I would have been waiting for the light between the parked car and the car that got hit when it happened. A similar thing happened again a year later. I was driving to campus and I had moved further away when I noticed my tire was going flat. So I went to go fill it up at the gas station. While there, I lost one of my quarters that I was feeding into the air machine. When I took off to head out of the parking lot, I saw it sitting about 15 feet from where I was filling up the tire. I stopped the car and got out to get the quarter. I was broke college student, don't judge, and when I turned around a car careened into a guy stopped at the intersection of the road I was about to pull out into. If I hadn't stopped to pick up the quarter I would have been at the intersection right in the final resting place of both the cars. I was supposed to go to a trade show in New Orleans for work. We'd done a lot of traveling that summer and a few weeks before my boss decided we should skip it. My return ticket was for the evening of the 28th of August, 2005. Just as Katrina started to hit. I might have made it out of there. But who knows? Afterwards I watched on the news all the damage the Hyatt Regency, where I was supposed to stay, received and was never so happy to have a business trip cancelled. My friend and I were working on a movie in a southern city. He was on set all day and I was in the office. Both busy as hell prepping for the next day, which was going to be a big shoot day. When he gets back to the hotel, I beg him to go out to MCD's. He's exhausted from working in the sun, but relents. We are downtown, so we start driving around looking for MCD's. They're supposed to be everywhere, right? After going up and down a few blocks I finally see a McDonald's sign a block over. But I'm in the wrong lane for a turn and go up another few blocks. I'm zoned in on those sweet golden arches and don't notice the police blaring sirens down the side streets heading the same way as us. Right as I'm about to turn in, cops converge and jump out of their cars. Guns drawn. 3 guys come out. 2 run to the back. 1 lifts a gun and shoots at the cops. Glass sprayed off the windshield. They returned fire. I'd love to tell you more, but I drove the hell away from there. Missed being in a shootout by 1 minute. I work at a car wash and one of the Mexicans, also drunk, that work there were messing around in a BMW and hit the clutch instead of the brake. The Beamer came flying into the tunnel where we scrubbed the cars before they go through the automated wash and smashed into the back of the Jeep we were prepping, pushing it through the entire tunnel, through the scrubby noodles and all. Not 15 seconds before this all went down I was in the front of the Jeep scrubbing the bugs off. Beamer was totaled, over $10,000 in damage. I could have died so easily if it happened 15 seconds earlier. When I was a kid, one of my best friends was the older couple next door's granddaughter. Her parents were divorced and her mom lived in another state, so she would come stay with her grandparents. Her dad was a deadbeat, all summer. Every summer, when she was in town, we were inseparable, and her grandparents would include me in a lot of family activities and occasionally trips, the zoo, the lake, etc., and my parents were always fine with it. One year, when we were probably 8 or 9, they invited me to go camping with them for a weekend late in the summer. When I asked my parents, my dad said hell no. I was really disappointed. He wouldn't give a reason why I wasn't allowed to go camping with my friend and her grandparents, other than I just don't want you to. I spent that weekend bummed out and playing by myself, wishing I were camping with my friend. 2-3 weeks after they got back from their camping trip, our neighbor, the grandfather, came down with some weird symptoms that resembled pneumonia. He was hospitalized and they found a weird, extremely dangerous mold in one of his lungs. He had to have a lobe of one of his lungs removed and was sick for quite a while. They later determined that the source of the mold was his sleeping bag from the camping trip. I could have easily ended up with that sleeping bag on the trip and probably would have suffered the same fate, or died. Since I was so young. The neighbor was an athletic, healthy 52-year-old man. After we learned of our neighbor's illness, my dad just looked at me and said that's why I didn't want you to go. I had a really bad feeling about it. He has weird premonitions, gut feelings like that frequently. But that was by far one of the luckiest. Oh. And the neighbor died 10 years after that from lung problems caused by his illness. R.I.P. Glenn. I'll always remember you as an extra grandpa. Roughly a year and a half ago I purchased an older SUV to have something to tinker with. Anxious, I began working on the vehicle almost as soon as I had it home. Within minutes I had it on a jack with one of the front wheels off. While underneath of it, using a standard jack for support, I received a text message from a girl I had began working with only a month prior asking to hang out that night. We had only spoken briefly at work and never outside of there, so I didn't think much of it. I continued to work underneath until she sent me a second text message. No exaggeration. As soon as I crawled from underneath and pulled the phone out of my pocket, the jack collapsed. Since the wheel was off, it landed at an angle right where I was laying. The girl and I ended up hanging out that night, and next month we will be together a year and a half. We have been living together since about 2 months after that text message. When I was 7, I was exiting the back of my mom's minivan. As I was stepping out, I reached back to slam the car door without looking. However, as I was sliding the door, I decided to close it gently because my mom gets shitty when I make loud noises. Turning around, I see my 78-year-old grandmother's head wedged right between the car frame and door as she was stepping out. I had completely forgotten that she was behind me and I almost demolished her skull. I still cringe every time I think about that day. If we're talking near-death experiences, I've got a lucky experience. When I was 12 or so, I was riding a horse during a competition. I had been killing it all day and was getting a bunch of blue ribbons. I guess I was running on adrenaline. For a particular race, I had to ride my horse, get off my horse, get someone, and mount my horse again and ride past the finish line. Well, when I got back on my horse, I didn't have my feet in the stirrups. When I started to, I found out that my girth had been messed up somehow. As soon as I put my feet back in the stirrups again, the saddle started slipping to the side. At this point, my horse is going a million miles per hour. My feet won't go in both of the stirrups, and my saddle is falling to the left of the horse. Of course, the foot that will stay in the stirrup is the foot on the right of the horse. Somehow I managed to free myself from the fucked up saddle and I fell on the ground. Apparently, I rolled just in time to not have my head stomped on by my horse. Lucky day. I used to drive a school bus. One of the little ones. I had a 6-year-old student, Justin, who looked exactly like Chucky from Child's Play. Right down to the striped shirt and overalls. He had to cross both lanes to board the bus. So I would stay close to the yellow lines to discourage cars from passing me. One morning, Justin was scurrying across the road, and suddenly stopped, turned around, and waved to his mom. He started around the front of the bus, and just as he got to the middle, a silver truck zoomed past me on the shoulder, missing my doors by inches. If Justin hadn't stopped to wave, he would have come out from in front of the bus just as the truck went past. There is no way the driver would have been able to see him over the bus hood, and wouldn't have been able to swerve out of the way, since there was a hillside on the right. Stopping to wave to his mom saved Justin's life that day. I also had a lucky life-saving kind of experience. I was getting a shot when I was about 13. I am very needle phobic, but this was my first time passing out. I left the clinic and was walking to the car with my sister and her boyfriend while my mom paid inside. Apparently I said I don't feel so good, and started wavering. My sister and her boyfriend thought I was kidding. So when I started to fall backwards, they expected me to back up so that I was still supported. I did not. I fell straight down. My sister said that I was headed straight for the curb, but just inches before I reached it, my body jerked and I hit the concrete. It was so loud my mom heard it inside. Had I hit the curb instead of the concrete, the impact would have split my skull and likely caused some very serious damage. Same amount of pressure. Smaller impact zone equals more damage. Instead, I just stopped breathing, turned blue, and started foaming at the mouth. A quick hospital visit and a long night being repeatedly woken up by family so I didn't sleep, concussions and all. I'm all better. All thanks to that random swerve which probably prevented me from serious brain damage. TL. DR sometimes concussions are okay. I have a couple. Once when driving home after camping. It was me, my buddy in the front, and who is now my girlfriend, might have been at the time. I don't remember, napping in the back. I wasn't paying 100% attention to the road since we were playing the alphabet game. Suddenly I see the cars in front of me stopped. At this point I didn't have the time to stop, so I slam on my brakes and swerve to the left. I was in the left lane at the time, onto the shoulder. But lose control of the car and get into the median, which is a big field of grass. A fence. Then more grass, then oncoming traffic. I get up to the fence and swerve in the opposite direction, still slowing down. And still not having control, and go through 4 lanes of traffic, which somehow were all stopped, and there was a gap in front of the cars for me to get through. To the other shoulder. Swerve again and spin out in the middle lanes. Sat there in shock for a few seconds before turning around and going on the shoulder waffling for a few minutes. Girl in back flew against the back of the front seats and hung on for her life. No damage done. Was crazy. A couple years later, while camping, we get hit by a microbus right in the middle of the night and a massive tree branch falls on our tent. But on the opposite side where 4 of us were sleeping. We get out and a couple minutes later, another falls on the side we were in. Not sure what would have happened if it was the other way around. But it was crazy. TLDR. Swerved through 4 lanes of traffic twice and didn't die. Years later didn't get crushed by a tree. When I was about 6 or 7 years old, I took the bus home from school like I usually did. And eventually it stopped at my normal stop, right by my house. As I got off the bus and prepared to walk across the street to my house, in front of the bus, a friend who lived across the street from me called out to me to stop over after I had lunch. It was that moment of hesitation that would save my life. As I turned to pass in front of the bus, no more than 2 feet away from crossing the double yellow lines, a black sports car ignores the flashing red lights, passes the bus on the left, and speeds by, almost blindsiding me. I remember being in a state of shock as the car ushers by me, almost close enough to touch it if I wanted. I don't remember much other than my dad running outside along with a few of the other neighbors hollering and making sure I was okay. Apparently they found the guy and he was arrested. That's only one of 4 times I almost died in horrific fashion. Good thing I'm not easily traumatized. A couple years ago, I was in mandatory military training in my country. I'm in South America. We were training in how to use grenades. Everyone did it right. Pull the pin, throw the grenade into a ravine, and get under cover. Everyone. But one idiot who, instead of throwing the grenade towards the ravine, threw the grenade upwards, above his head. He endangered us, our instructors, and his own life. Everyone freaked out and tried to take cover. Luckily for us, a gust of wind moved the grenade and threw it into the ravine and it exploded safely. I was being very stupid. Yes, I know. Drunk with friends on a warehouse roof at night. Had a race with a buddy of mine. It was a huge roof, like Walmart parking lot sized, and it's pitch black out. I win the race because he drops out and starts yelling about it. I think he's yelling because he lost. All of a sudden I go from top speed to 0 because I smashed into a steel wall somehow. I'm in too much pain to realize what has happened, so after a bit of yelling and tears my forebrain kicks back in and I realize I'm on the floor. I had snagged a foot on a low pipe and had gone instantly 90 degrees into the ground. Nothing broken but some bruised ribs and some bloody abrasions on my arms. I was more embarrassed than anything else. So I get up and sheepishly go back to my friends, one of whom is obviously the guy who lost the race. He's like, "Dude, look where you fell. Why didn't you stop?" I was yelling like crazy. And of course I'm like, yeah, I know I didn't see that pipe, man. It's fucking dark out here. Who puts pipes on a roof anyways? He says. No. Fucking shit, man. Look. And points at where I fell. The pipe was about 10 feet from the edge of the roof. If I hadn't tripped on it I would have done a Carl Lewis right off into oblivion 5 stories down into the parking lot at my grave. Felt the cold fingers of the Reaper that night. But Sirio fooled my ass out of there. Not today. Motherfucker. I was visiting some of my extended family in Chile quite a few years ago. My great aunt owned a ranch out there, and had some horses that she recently bought there. She let my brother and I ride them, but separately. Note that we rode them without a saddle. After my brother's successful first ride, it was my turn. I don't remember what I did or what happened to cause it, but the horse started galloping really fast. I panicked and jumped off the horse. I somehow landed in a pile of hay, unharmed. I figured I should have at least some broken bones if I landed on the ground. I don't know if anyone but myself would call this lucky. I once got stabbed in the eye with a screwdriver. Was purely accidental, by the way. I was letting this guy help me change out some wheels on a pushcart at a restaurant I used to work at. He was a little slow, and I felt bad because no one would let him do anything other than wash dishes and take out trash. So I asked him if he wanted to help me change out these wheels. He said yes, and we began taking the old ones off. I handed him the screwdriver and told him to hold it in place on the bolt while I cranked the wrench to pull the nuts off. I asked him if he was ready and he said yes. My face was above both his hands and mine as I cranked the wrench. He lost control of the screwdriver and up and flew right into my left eye. I turned just in time. It actually only scraped my eyeball and put a small cut in my eyelid. I am missing 3 or 4 eyelashes on my upper eyelid in my left eye right by my nose. Other than the occasional sharp pain in my eye, I have no ill effects from it. I didn't even go to the hospital. I didn't think the injury was that bad and I didn't want him to get into trouble. I told them something ricocheted into my eye and caught my eyelid. It was my last day of high school and had prom later that day. I had forgotten to return a history book earlier that day, and if I didn't return it by the end of the day I would not be able to walk across stage for graduation. I was in a hurry to drop off the book and get to my hair appointment on time. It was raining hard, so I made a run for the door. Just as I got to it, I saw through the reflection of the glass on the door a huge flash. Felt the ground shake and turned to see the sidewalk cracked in half. I barely missed getting hit by lightning. Now I am terrified of walking outside during thunderstorms. I was driving to a cabin with my mom last summer when we noticed a pack of wolves in the middle of the dirt road we were on. There was forest on either side of us, so we couldn't go around until they moved. We sat there for at least half an hour as they walked up to the car and stared at us. Coolest experience I think I had last year. Once they decided to go back into the woods, we continued driving. Once on the highway we got stuck in a shit ton of traffic and started resenting the wolves. Turns out 20 minutes earlier there was a 10+ car pileup involving an oil tanker and an explosion. Chances are we could have been involved if not for the wolves. My friend talked me into buying Fable II the day it came out. Having never played the series before and not having an interest in it prior to then, I almost said no to buying it. But I did anyway and got so hooked that I didn't want to shut it off. I was planning on walking to a plaza next to my apartment complex for dinner that night. So dinner time gets here, and as I was about to go at the time I originally planned, I decided to just play one more quest in the game. After I finished the quest, I walk outside and get to the plaza where it is filled with cop cars. Turns out the restaurant I was going to get my food from was robbed while I played that extra mission. And I would have been there right when it happened if I had turned the game off and went there when I originally planned to. I always wonder what would have happened to me if I had been there when that went down. I definitely lucked out. I used to work for an arcade. We were renovating the shop, so we had to truck all the machines to a storage location. Anyway, the trucks had one of those electric lowering tailgates, and we also used these 1 meter squared sheets of metal about 3 millimeters thick to use as ramps to help the machines roll onto the tailgate from the road. As we were lowering the machines off the truck, we had 2 or 3 people holding the machines steady so they didn't fall off. As the tailgate was being lowered, someone had rested the metal plate against the truck vertically but was right under the tailgate edge. I noticed the plate just as the tailgate touched it, so I quickly tried to pull it out of the way with one hand as I was still holding the machine with the other. But it was already being squished against the road and was too jammed for a one-handed swipe. I was just about to try with both hands as I yelled out to raise the gate and noticed it was starting to bend, but at the last second decided not to. Just then it shot out and flung across the road like a giant razor blade being shot out of a cannon. I would have lost my hand had I not just stopped 1 second before. From time to time I count myself lucky and look at my hand wondering how my life could have changed due to a second difference. I caught the worst stomach flu from my daughter at Thanksgiving time last year. I was throwing up every 30 to 45 minutes for almost a day straight. My abdominal muscle ached ferociously because I was vomiting so violently. A day after it started I was beginning to feel better and was starting to eat a little and rehydrate myself with a lot of water. Once I got enough fluid back into my system I took a piss and what came out did not look like urine. It was blood. The violent vomiting caused the then unknown tumor in my left kidney to start bleeding. Clear cell type renal carcinoma. Ferment grade 2. Size of a tangerine. My left kidney was removed at the end of January and the pathology report showed no spread outside of the kidney to lymph nodes, ureter, arteries, veins, etc. My urologist says he is 95% sure the tumor had not metastasized to somewhere else in my body. I am going to have yearly x-rays for quite a while and maybe a CAT scan or two, but I'm probably out of the woods. If I had not caught the flu from my daughter I might not have found the tumor for a couple more years and by that time it might have been too late. TL. DR. Caught flu from daughter. Saved my life from cancer. When I was a lot younger and a lot more stupid, me and my buddy were playing in his backyard with a bow and arrows. Now granted at this young age, bow and arrows is like the coolest thing ever. We literally played all day and into the night. We had just shot all the arrows. Again. But I hid one behind my back because I wanted to play a prank on my friend. We were standing under an awning shooting out into a hay bale in his backyard. So granted the light from under the awning only illuminated 8 feet up. My friend went to go collect the arrows and as he went into the unprotected night I screamed, "Hey David. Heads up." And I proceeded to shoot the arrow into the air above him. He looked at me and said, "Are you fucking serious?" and started to sprint back under the awning. As he is running the arrow comes down and quite literally goes through the space between his thumb and his index finger. Not the skin, but that gap. The fletchings from the arrow brushed his skin. He was quite pissed at me. However we were best friends so we ended up laughing it off.